All right, so in this video, we're going to be discussing different methods that have been evaluated to increase happiness in various measures. Some of them are kind of mindset interventions. Some of them are things that we, hear very often, like exercising, spending time with other people. But I'm going to be presenting some of the researched approaches to increasing well-being and increasing happiness. So, like I said, if you're going to increase the positive emotion or happiness and fulfillment you feel, you can change your mindset, you can change your behaviors, which in turn influence your emotions um, and your thoughts or cognitions. So one that's been very well researched is your audio works, you just can't hear me. Turo, you can obviously hear me. Right? Can you still hear me, Turo? Were you on mute? Happens. All right, everyone's ears work, everyone's audio works. All right, so um, intervention number one, approach number one, mindset number one is gratitude. So gratitude is um, happiness isn't having what you want, it's wanting what you have, right? Um, Gratitude is, I guess, in a basic sense, focusing on what you have in life that you appreciate. So there's obviously a wide range of circumstances that people live in, but I am of the belief that everybody can find something in their life, right, that they have some amount of appreciation for, admiration for other people, um, appreciating that they have a certain food that they like or water. There's a wide range of things, the ways that we can approach it. And when thinking and talking about gratitude, it's not about negating the negative things, right? It's not about saying that our problems don't matter, but it's trying to also spend some time and acknowledge the things that are already going well, because that's really where our meaning and our happiness will come from, is things that we already have, right? And gratitude works in a lot of ways to increase well-being. I mean, in itself, it produces positive emotions, produces good feelings. It makes us more resilient. It can improve relationships. It can just help us notice small things that we have or appreciate. And gratitude is, at some level, an attitude. We're thinking how many thoughts a minute, a second, so many things running through our head. And to some degree, we don't have control over what spontaneously pops in our head. But the more we pay attention to little things that we might not notice, like how good a meal tastes or the support of a friend that we really appreciate, the more that gets trained and kind of starts, that program, if you will, runs itself. So in research, there's a few like explicit exercises that they've done that people have reported helps with depression, increased well-being, um, and one of those is gratitude journaling, which has been kind of, it's like a big thing in the self-help world now, right? And what they did is they actually had people take about 5 minutes um, every day or a few days a week to write about what they're grateful for. And that's just, again, taking just a few minutes at the end of the day, um, and thinking about like what's in your life that you appreciate, that makes you happy, that makes you feel a sense of fulfillment. That's something that we I feel like we don't often do, and it can be really powerful to just keep that in the forefront more often. The other one is what went well. So that's just like writing out three things that went well, and kind of going into like, and again, that can be something as small as you did the laundry, or you clean the kitchen, or something bigger like you got a job, or you had a really good date, you had a nice conversation. Um, that can be essentially anything that added to your day. And then this one is very cheesy. Um, and this is the gratitude visit or gratitude letter. So in this one, they actually had people write out a letter to someone thanking them for either a specific event that or a specific thing they did that helped them out, and saying like, hey, like you say helped me move, that took a lot of pressure. Um, yeah, I think Turo that like I mean, people have a bias towards being negative, right? I mean, part of that is a survival mechanism to prevent ourselves from, being exposed to extreme conditions, to predators, hunger, etc. Um, and some of it's cultural too. I'm not sure how. I don't know if this is the case in Uruguay, but definitely in the United States, in my understanding, a lot of the West, there's a very strong bias in the media towards negative events. And I've seen data to suggest that that's only gotten worse in the past few decades because it's a lot more attention grabbing if you report that somebody was murdered in a fiery car accident rather than, a Girl Scout sells $2,000 in cookies and donates it to charity or something like that. So I think there's in a lot of ways a cultural bias in news, and there's kind of an inherent bias towards negative information. So which is why I think it's important to learn how to think about positive things alongside negative things. Um, and in the gratitude letter, it's actually writing out that like writing a letter to someone and reading it to them or giving it to them and saying, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate what you helping again, like helping me move, or helping me record the song, or whatever it might be. And it sounds cheesy, right? But it can be really, really powerful. Like something I love doing now is giving people letters, um, like as a gift. And there's something that is just really, I don't know, really connecting and really wholesome about putting into words why you appreciate someone or why you're thankful. So that's the quick run through of gratitude. There's a lot of research on it. There's a kind of a whole field or a whole subsection of positive psychology, um, which we'll go into more detail at some point. But that's kind of the more basic, or kind of the basic. I don't think this is going to be big enough for me to do everything all in the notepad, so I'll take it one by one. So that was gratitude. The next, I guess I'll group them two together. Some people call it optimism, some people call it changing reference points. A lot of this, by the way, is taken from Sonia Lyubomirsky's The How to Happiness, and Laurie Santos, who I know Kat loves. I love Laurie Santos. She has a podcast called The Happiness Lab, and she has a course on Coursera. She's a Yale professor that has a course on the science of well-being, and a lot of that comes from her. Um, and a couple of strategies are based in cultivating optimism and changing your reference point, which, again, it's not about being unrealistic. It's about kind of keeping positives in mind as well. So one thing that we do, I'll call this one optimism. One thing that we tend to do, right, is you think about a future event, having a job interview, having a date, and you think about all the things that could go wrong, which can be useful, right? It can help you plan. It's also at a certain point that's associated with developing anxiety and depression symptoms, right? Because if you spend an hours kind of worrying about how something will go, and you don't actually take action, then that doesn't become helpful anymore. However, what you can also do, right, is you can also tell yourself a story about what could go right, right? And depending on what the thing is, there's a varying degree of likelihood that either could happen, right? And there are things you can do to make it more likely. But if you only have the idea of the party or the interview or the social interaction or the paper or whatever it is or the job, your day at work, if you're only thinking about it going negative, then that's going to put you in a worse mood and it's going to probably make it less likely that it goes well. So again, it's kind of taking the negative, but also looking at what if things were to go well? What would that look like? And then, along with looking at the negative and seeing how can I potentially prevent that or cope with that, you can look at what could potentially be positive and be like, how can I move towards that? Um, so that in itself, I think, can balance things out and make things make you more energized, make you more motivated. Another thing that's kind of talked about in this, which isn't the traditional idea of optimism, but I guess let me first consider what what might go right. Another idea that comes from this is having long-term goals and breaking them down. You always try to get better in headbutt your ways. What do you mean by headbutt? I think that's a term I would probably use too. Is like go like right at it, but very hard headed, like kind of push, right? Like you're pushing through things. Um, I guess that's what I think of when I think of like headbutting my way through life. Um, yeah. So when you have having long term goals and breaking them down into smaller, tangible goals can increase optimism. Because if you think to yourself, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have X job, I'm going to have X car, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to be in good shape. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get better, try harder. Very kind of like, that's kind of the attitude that I've had a lot of the times too. Like rah rah, just kind of like push, let's go. Which has some usefulness to it, I think for sure. But there's a balance that can be had with being kind to yourself and being like systematic about setting goals. So goal setting is a whole thing too that I like talking about. But when you actually like say your goal is to be in good shape, right, or to make $50,000 a year or something, um, those are goals that can be helpful, right, and motivating. But it's more helpful and motivating when you say, all right, well, I want to be in good shape, and then you say I'm going to work out 30 minutes 3 times a week, and you say on Thursdays and Wednesdays after work at 5 o'clock or whatever. Or if you're trying to make a certain amount of money or get a house, having either being in a career or working towards the career, right? So the goals you have out here, they kind of, when you start seeing the smaller goals lead up to them, then they stack on each other and become motivating, right? And increase a sense of optimism. I think another way to think about it is being optimistic can protect against being helpless or being hopeless. So a lot of it's about critical thinking too. Another part of optimism is remembering past success. Well, considering various routes to success. So different ways you can approach doing things. Potentially having a black back. How do you spell success? S-U suck. I don't even know. I think it's S. Okay, it is C-C-E-S-S. Okay, a weird word, isn't it? Success. Success. Okay, success. 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 Various routes to success. My lisp is coming out, which makes it all the more successful. English is quite weird. Um, so you're gonna have to help me with Spanish. My Spanish is muy mal. I'm trying to learn Duolingo, of course. um, yeah, so having various outcomes and something that I try to do more and more now that's super helpful is remember past successes. So, like for example, I just started teaching a class for drunk drivers at my job, and I was anxious about it when I started, and I started telling myself stories about how I wasn't going to be able to do it. And then I remembered I actually literally did a couple of the classes by myself when I was an intern without the other clinician there. And like when I was just worrying, I didn't even remember that, right? It was just like, oh no, I can't do this. It's going to be difficult. Um, but then I remembered I've actually literally done this before, or at least part of it. And I think that's relevant, like even if you're trying a new workout, even if the workout's different, like, well, I've worked out before, I've done this part of the workout, or before I've cut back on this part of the diet. Um, yeah, English seems to have very bizarre rules the more that I learn about other languages and how they approach conjugation and things of that nature. But I'm not super well versed in any other language, but it seems like that's consistent with what I hear a lot of people say is English is a weird one to learn. Okay, a couple of the exercises, or actually one of them it's I guess more concrete is actually reframing the past. So this could involve looking at something that didn't go as planned and worked well. This doesn't look this doesn't look great on the because I'm just looking at my notepad. I know it doesn't look great on the on OBS, does it? Maybe doing this. I wonder. I feel like the best way to do that would probably be yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I like the idea of a cliche to represent it is like when one door closes, another door opens. So, like I love, for example, I love my job right now, and before and the school I'm at right now actually, and I got rejected from my top school, um, which was a doctorate program that had like a lot of focus. It was a counseling doctorate program, and I really loved the atmosphere at the school. I loved the professors I met. And I also got rejected from my internship at a college campus that I really wanted to be a counselor at. And I was disappointed both times. However, I realized a while after, like in my program now, I actually didn't want to get a doctorate. It's not consistent with the goals that I have. Um, and I want to become a licensed mental health clinician, which is what I'm going for. And I also love my program. I've gotten so much out of it. And then with my job, I would probably wouldn't have even been able to do my internship. I wouldn't have been able to do it because of COVID. And that's obviously a, drastic circumstance, but I also love the internship that I have now, and now I actually work there. I have a job at my internship. So those are two scenarios, like getting rejected from your top school and my top internship, that are not great, right? But something came out of them that I could have never predicted. I think the same can be said for relationships. Like everyone is, being rejected or being broken up with is extremely painful. However, that almost always hopefully paves the way to a stronger relationship. So I think that life is littered with those things where something didn't go as planned and then it ended up working out. And the next time that something bad happens, that is can often be the case. And then an actual journaling exercise that has been used is best possible. See, I'm primed right now. Best possible time, like I'm on live split. That was funny. Best possible self. So that's actually um, writing out an ideal future. So that actually consists of sitting down for 15, 20 minutes and writing out what would life look like? You know, where where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? But actually, like where do, like if reasonably speaking, things went well, what would you be doing? And I mean, you could even say like if you won $10 million, what would you be doing too? Um, but in this case, it was kind of, if things went reasonably well. So when I did it, it was, if things went according to plan, I'd probably have my own private practice. I'd be making six figures. I'd have a good following online. I'd have a wife that I care about deeply. I'd have my own house. I'd be writing a book that published and went well. Like I'd have a pool. I'd really want a pool, a recording studio. I'd be in touch with my close friends. I'd of course have a sub hour in Mario. So like things like that. I think it can put you in touch with what matters to you and why, and you can be surprised by some of the things that you come up with, or at least I was. And not only does that give you something to shoot for, it can make you think about, well, why am I shooting for what I'm shooting for? Do I actually care about these things? All right, so that's optimism. And if anyone is interested, again, Laurie Santos on Coursera has a free course called The Science of Wellbeing that goes over a lot of this. And she's, I mean, I'll give myself some credit. I think I'm fairly articulate, but she presents these in a really really cool, engaging way, um, more so than I can. But another thing that is talked about is reference points. So this is again kind of a matter of taking a lot of things into consideration. Um, and one of the components of this is comparing yourself to yourself. So another, like how we were saying, how we tend to have a bias towards negative information or negative perspectives. And I think part of that's biological, evolutionary based, and part of that's cultural. We also have a tendency to compare ourselves to other people, um, especially more powerful, attractive people, right? I mean, women comparing themselves to idealized images of other women is like a big problem, right? Um, Saying you wish you had more money. I mean, there's always gonna, unless you're the best in the world at something, there'll always be someone better than you at that thing, right? It absolutely do be like that. It do it do be a thing that we do all the time. Um, that person, is better looking than me. They have more money. Their girlfriends are more attractive. They're eating better. They have a better job, and we're not other people, right? Like no one else has the same biology, circumstances, abilities as we do. So, I mean, I think it can be helpful to look at other people and admire them and kind of look at, well, I want something like that. Um, but I don't, I think you can only improve yourself, right? You can only improve the past version of yourself to become better or the present version of yourself. So comparing yourself only to yourself and not other people when you can is helpful. That's something that Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. Um, and then in perspective, a lot of things aren't as bad as they could be or as they were. Like, depending on your situation in life, you might have had, like, be frustrated with your job, but in the past you had a job that you hated even more. Um, or so I mean, so I think sometimes I mean, kind of the trope or the cliche is first world problems, but sometimes I'll get really frustrated about something, and then I think, like I'm upset that I didn't my drink order was wrong, right, at whatever place I went to, but some people don't have clean water, right? And that's not to I think a lot of the times people use that in a self-deprecating way, like I can't believe that I'm upset about this thing when I'm so wealthy or I live in America, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy. I think you can say, I'm upset that I didn't get my promotion, right? And that's valid. It's fine to be upset you didn't get your promotion. However, I still have a job, right? And I still have a stable income or something like that. I sometimes found myself getting mildly mad because I'm better than someone, but he is doing better than me. I honestly do that all the time. I do that in Mario. I do that in like exercise. I do that when I'm looking at other YouTubers. Um, there's definitely like a jealousy that, or an envy, jealousy, whichever you want to call it, that's there for me. And I think that's important to recognize, right? And I've gotten better at catching myself. Because it's like, yeah, like because you want, I don't know, you want to, everyone wants some level of recognition or some level of power, influence, or status, or accomplishment. So I think that happens a lot. All right, the next one is another mindset one, and then the rest of the ones I want to talk about are a lot of well, I guess it all at some level comes down to mindset. The next one is called a growth mindset, which is something that Carol Dweck kind of has done a lot of research on. And a growth mindset is the idea that skill is malleable and can be learned. And obviously, there are biological determinants of how good you can be at something. Um, if you're 4'9", basketball is going to be a little bit more difficult for you than somebody that's 6'7". Some people, I mean, everyone has different innate, I don't want to say innate capacity, but innate predisposition towards certain things. So some people are just going to be more talented at as an artist, as a musician. Some people have perfect pitch. Some people have really good rhythm. Um, some people are more flexible than others. Some people are more intelligent in certain ways, and that's obviously a thing. But having a growth mindset is about learning to cultivate an attitude where you focus more on like what you can actually change and like know what you can change. Um, so if you want to play the guitar. And again, if you want to say play the guitar or you want to be a runner, it's not about being faster than Usain Bolt or being, Steve Vai or something, right? It's just about you improving. So when you focus more on just you improving and what you can improve, that again cultivates a sense of competence and achievement and growth when you focus more on that. Um, Something else that ties into this is something that I did our research group did our undergraduate research on that ties into this is the idea of challenge appraisal, which is thinking challenge difficult situations equal opportunity. So rather than saying I have a presentation coming up, I can't handle it, it's not going to be worth it. You can say a presentation is coming up. It's going to be difficult, but I know that doing it will help me learn and grow as a person. And I feel like this for me was completely, it was just a huge shift. Because whenever we're doing something new, whenever we're doing something difficult, there's probably going to be a part of us that says you shouldn't do it or you can't do it or this is going to suck. And that's like, things are going to be difficult. We're going to fail at stuff. But doing difficult things is how we grow, right? And how we become more resilient. And life is about doing difficult things. If things weren't difficult, then we wouldn't learn much. We wouldn't get better at things. We wouldn't grow. This isn't something that's actually been researched, but I really like writing about things you've seen growth in. Not like plants. Not talking about watching plants grow. um, but I've had some really, really positive experiences just kind of sitting down, especially if I've been down on myself and thinking, like, what have I accomplished in the past 2 years? What have I grown in? And there's always something. Like I feel very grateful because I've grown in a lot of things. I've gotten become a better speaker. I've gotten a job that I really like. I got into grad school. I made a lot of friends, etc. But there's always something that you can find that you've grown, I think. Yeah, being optimistic when doing difficult things is very, very important. Um, Very important for mental health, as far as I'm concerned, because that's like I don't know, that's the adventure of growing, of learning, is doing things that are difficult and learning how to do things that are difficult. Um, I mean, this one kind of ties into a lot of different things, but just having like in the first last lecture we talked about um, social connections are the strongest predictor of happiness, for a variety of reasons, having support, moments of joy, laughter, having a different perspective, having someone to like lean on in good, difficult times and support each other to positive, share moments together. Social connections are really, really important. And I'd actually love to have like, I guess, go through a social skills type thing. Um, it's kind of like its own thing. Or like there's a channel I really like called Charisma on Command that talks about different approaches to working on confidence and socializing. Um, I think actually I'll look at an idea that I learned that I really like that kind of I think is applicable to pretty much all social interactions and conversations. Um, Strongest predictor. And what is the terminology for it? I think it's active. Oh, active, constructive, active, constructive conversation. Okay. This is one of something among many, many, many different things that I want to go into more detail in like a separate stream about. Um, so this looks at four different types of communication. So active, constructive, passive, constructive, active, destructive. Spelling. Okay. So let's say, oh, let's say someone comes home. Let's just say your friend is like, "Hey, I got a new job. Um, I'm going to be working on weekends. I'm really happy about this." And then you say, passive, and then you say like, whatever, whatever, or like, oh, or something that's kind of like insinuating you're not happy about it, but not actually saying you're not happy about it. Active destructive is like, well, now we can't, well, now we can't spend time together, or you can't do that job. So kind of actively being putting someone down for something. Uh, Passive constructive is like neat, cool, just kind of like, oh, nice. Active constructive is, I'm so happy. Tell me more. Ask open questions. So I guess like the big thing is open questions, attention. So it's paying attention. So Most of the time, I mean, obviously, sometimes people are going to do like somebody might get a new job, and that could make you sad that you're not going to see someone as much. Um, and there are ways to approach that constructively. However, I think that just kind of what this model kind of focuses on is a lot of the times I think we're in the passive constructive area. If someone tells us good news, we'll be like, oh, cool, nice. Whereas the engagement, when someone has an accomplishment, it's awesome to be like, oh, like, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. Tell me more about the job. What do you like about it? What are you looking forward to, etc. So that's just one small area that can improve social interactions among many. Then the idea of savoring is similar to being to gratitude. Probably should have done that right after gratitude. Um, but savoring is just noticing things you appreciate in the moment. So I mean, gratitude is it's that can be gratitude as well. Savoring is more. Man in Mario shirt says interesting things. That should be my the caption. I appreciate that the interesting compliment though. I'm glad that this is of interest. um, yeah. So the experience of if you're eating good food and saying this is good food and paying attention to it and seeing that, right? It makes it better, I think. I mean, and there's research that they've done where having people do the exercise, but sharing things with people, like I got a new job or someone had a nice compliment, gave me a nice compliment. We love like humans love sharing with each other, right? We love showing appreciation. It's very positive to show appreciation for people, show appreciation for things when they're there. Um, so it's one of the cliche savoring and complimenting at the same time. There you go. Who's that? Natin? I don't know if I know whose emote that is, but that's so funny. It's Link with sunglasses. Um, yeah, noticing that you're enjoying something is important because that's where the good stuff is, right? When you're enjoying something. I mean, that can be applied to everything from food to sex to video games to a sunset. There's that moment I think you can pop out and be like, "Wow, this is really something," and it adds a lot to the moment. Which I think, yeah, actually, I'll do mindful. I'll kind of talk about mindfulness in addition to that. I lurked one day in her channel and I got gifted a sub. He got the cool emote. um, Mindfulness, I actually have a video about mindfulness that goes into it in a lot of detail. Um, but mindfulness is essentially paying atten paying attention non-judgmentally or trying to be non-judgmental. And what mindfulness can help with Bob's YouTube is lit. Word. LIT. Um, so mindfulness has gotten a lot of hype, right? It's kind of all over the self-help world. Um, and I mean, people have been practicing mindfulness for thousands of years. It's at some level, I mean, it's rooted in some yogic practices and meditation. But I mean, really, mindfulness is just it's paying attention to what's happening and noticing what's happening. So that can help you with savoring like the experiences you're having. It's used a lot in like addiction to look at, when are the urges or cravings for a drug coming up, and that's applicable to anything, right? That's applicable to I notice anger, I notice the tightness in my chest, I notice I mean, the joy that I'm experiencing. It's really just about noticing what's happening in the moment. And the non-judgmental part isn't about not having judgmental thoughts because that's what people do. That's what humans do. It's about seeing them and being like, okay, like I can act on that or not. Or if you have, if you crave a slice of pizza, maybe you eat the pizza and that's fine. But noticing that you chose to eat the pizza and not just being, it's like the opposite of being mindless. So mindfulness, again, is a topic that can, on its own, we can talk about for hours. You're making a pizza right now. What kind of pizza? The link yeet is in my. There's a yeet for. Oh, that's Seabeard. The link is in my. It's Mind Bobby Connection. And it's in my panels thingy. Um, Turo's a great artist, also, Kat. If you want to ever check out Toro's stuff. Um, every day at 4 ET, I think you said, right? You stream? What am I doing? No. I'm trying to think of like actually on the weekend, yeah. Okay. Anyways, I look back paying attention. Um yeah, so mindfulness has been used in a ton of different um contexts and settings to mitigate depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, ADHD symptoms, improve well-being. So it has a very, very large application, and I'm not going to go super into it here. I have another video on it. There's so many good resources for mindfulness. And I think like the big things in terms of mental health, very simply, is mindfulness can help you contact things that you really enjoy, build self-awareness, be less reactive, notice what's coming up for you, have more of a sense of like equanimity and peace. Although that's not necessarily the goal, but it's something that comes from it. So it's really a great tool that I encourage everyone to. You can look at some of the resources I have, and then I have a lot of links in the mindfulness video that I have because mindfulness is a really big part of mental health right now. Amy's vegan margarita. Oh, so none of that meat. Oh, so is that like fake cheese? I assume. I haven't found a fake cheese that I really like. Um, I have not. All right. This is something that in our overview of well-being, we talked about the concept of, which is flow, which is being in the zone. In the zone, engaged, um, losing your sense of time. A lot of the time, it's associated with like really good sex, playing sports at your full potential, improving with music. I mean, I even think at some level, speed running can be like and send you into a flow state. So it's things that make you really, really engaged, where you lose your sense of time, where you're being challenged, but you're also using your area of expertise. So yeah, hiking too definitely can put you in a flow state and have a lot of peak experiences. Um, so having that in your life is we're finding more and more it's really important for mental health and well-being to find things that you really use your talents and you're really engaged in. And I think everyone can find that in many different ways. And having that at work as much as you can, I think is great. I know it's not difficult depending on what you're doing, but finding it at work, finding it in your day-to-day lives, trying to spend more time when you have downtime doing things that are active leisure when you can rather than passive leisure. Integrating that into your life is very, very important. Why do people from the US enjoy hiking so much? That's an interesting question. We're from New England too, Turo, so we have mountains all around us. Um, I think, yeah, it really is in New England, at least in like Colorado. It's a big cultural thing. Part of it's because we have mountains around. Part of it's because, I mean, I think that's probably people have liked hiking for a while, but right now I think it's associated with the kind of the wellness movement too, of like, being mindful, doing yoga, getting out in nature. So I think Part of it's just the location where we are in the U.S. Part of it's because humans just, I don't know, like nature in general. Um, and there's kind of like the different. I think people who are in the city or people who are rural have like a different somewhat different relationship with it. But people really take pride in their mountains. It's kind of like a lifestyle thing, which is interesting. It's like associated with a certain lifestyle. Do you not find that? I don't know anything about the landscape of Uruguay. Are there like mountains there? Do people kind of not um, incorporate it as much into the lifestyle? Even the guys in Southie. Yeah, people love hiking. Also, welcome, Fear the Noodle. I love your name, Fear the Noodle. Yeah, so finding some flow states, very important. Uh, very important for, I mean, the flow itself being engaging for learning, having positive experiences, uh, finding more meaning in what you're doing. You have plants, planes, and forestation. Interesting. I love the outdoors, challenging physical activity, mental challenge, connect with a friend. Yeah, I agree. It's challenging, it's beautiful, it helps you connect with people. Highest point not above 800 meters, really? Interesting. We have 4,000-foot mountains, which is a meter is what, 3 foot, 3 feet? So like 1,300 plus meter mountains, like within 2 hours of us, 3 hours in a lot of different directions here. Which at the end of this, I want to talk. I'm going to talk about like exercise and nature and as kind of part of it. Yeah, dozens, like 48. The Mount of Souls. I want to look that up later. The Mount of Souls. Okay. All right. This is something that there's a survey for. There's a whole like I don't know how many pages, like 700-page book on character strengths. It's 24 different strengths that have been categorized. Um, Oh, I don't know if off the top of my head if I'm gonna remember all the categories. Actually, no. It's called values in action. So I mean, there's a bunch of different things like being open-minded, critical thinking, gratitude, love, kindness. So it talks about it was an attempt by one of the psychologists, cat. His name is Christopher Peterson. It was Martin Seligman and Christopher Peterson. Um, Created something called the Values in Action Inventory in 2004. Yeah, when I saw that name, I was like, what? Um, but what they did was they looked at a bunch of different literature, a bunch of different cultures, and they tried to find 24 traits that were shared and admired by a bunch of different cultures. So again, it's things like it's like perseverance, open-mindedness, gratitude, and they looked at how a bunch of them correlated to well-being and anxiety and all of these different measures. So identify and they've done a lot of research on like identifying what your strengths are and using them more helps you go into flow states more. It makes your life more fulfilling because you're capitalizing on your strengths, you're capitalizing on things that can like come easy to you. It's important in searching for a career too. So there's a ton of information on character strengths. And again, if that's something that I could do, I probably will do an entire stream on. You should search for its Spanish name, Cerro de las Animas. So that's, I assume, is animas the soul, like anima? Okay. And then another important concept, something that ties into what you mentioned earlier, Turo, is being self-compassionate. Um, you were saying headbutting through things. I think you can, so to speak, headbutt through things with self-compassion. Anima from the Greek word. Interesting because the concept of the spirit animal too, anima. Um, so I mean, self-compassion again. There's no um, people have been talking about this for a long time, but the first person to look at it scientifically, so to speak, was Kristen Neff, and she divides it into, and it's been looked at psychometrically too, um, into three different categories: self-kindness, mindfulness. Oh man, what was the third one? Self-kindness, mindfulness. Did I really forget? Am I gonna have to look it up? Self-kindness, mindfulness, and keeping things in perspective is the same as. I actually have to look it up. I forget. Common humanity. So self-kindness is, I mean, speaking kindly to yourself, right? I think actually the way that she phrases it that I really like is treating yourself like a loved one, because I think that that's relating to yourself in that way is nurturing. It's nurturing, and I think that you want the best for your loved ones, right? So you can still root yourself on in a caring way, and without having kind of that harsh self-talk. I mean, it's difficult. A lot of us just do that naturally, right? Um, and she has on her website, I think it's just selfcompassion.org, a ton of exercises. So some of them are like writing yourself a letter as if you're like writing to a friend that's struggling. Um, just even just like giving yourself a pat on the back, literally. Writing um, to like an imaginary friend, as if you were talking to like an imaginary friend. Um, and I think there's 8 different exercises that she has. Um, with mindfulness, it's the way that she uses it is somewhat different from the definition that we talked about earlier, although it encompasses a lot of it, and that's just kind of seeing the bigger picture during suffering, which really just talks about a lot of what we were referencing, where it's seeing some of the good things that are present in your life as well as some of the suffering. Um, it's like seeing it as part of quote unquote the bigger picture, which ties into common humanity of seeing what brings people together. So, like, if you losing a loved one is obviously extremely difficult, but we're kind of all in that together. We're all in the cycle of life together, and like identifying more with what makes people human. That's kind of a big part of where I chose my name from. Is I like the idea, or I identify a lot with being a person. I think that's kind of a wonderful thing. I think it's a really powerful thing. So some of being more self-compassionate involves noticing when you're being self-critical, and changing some of the language. And I think that, and there's evidence too that being self-compassionate makes you more productive too. Um, so it's not something that's going to necessarily, like, if you stop being hard on yourself, you'll stop working. Okay, and then sometimes people think of like physical and mental health as separate, but I mean the field more and more is moving more towards their one. They're not. It's like the whole organism is important to consider, and mental health affects physical health, and physical health affects mental health, and like the brain isn't like isolated from the body, right? Like most of the serotonin in our bodies are produced in our gut, and like there's more research about like our gut being like a second brain, and then our body's constantly interacting with all different parts of our body in like very complex ways. Um, but I guess for this, I'm just gonna put like health. Like I mean, everything I was talking about is health, but this is more traditional markers of health. So that's exercise, right? Exercise. We know exercising is good for us. It's mountains and mountains of research, right? It's being more used more and more to treat depression. Um, it's being thought of more and more as really, really, really essential for positive mental health. It's also helpful for ADHD, anxiety, and like exercise is beneficial for everybody, right? It doesn't matter what level of physical activity you are capable of. Moving more is pretty much always a good idea, short of extreme works out that you can get injured, right? I mean, there's so many different there's so many different ways it benefits us, like mental health and mood improvement, confidence, focus. We sleep better when we exercise, and it's better for our physical health in so many different ways, and protecting us from a wide variety of different diseases. Um, Sleep, I have a video on that goes into a lot of. It's actually a an ironic video, or I guess not ironic. It kind of jokes about ways that we can how to essentially stay awake, right? But there's a lot of information on and a lot of research on how important sleep is too. Um, how much sleep we need depends on the person. It's usually somewhere between 7 to 9 hours. Um, Having a consistent sleep schedule is very important. It helps us regulate our mood and our attention and our circadian rhythm. Having a sleep routine is important, like doing similar things at night, similar things at bed, uh, avoiding like caffeine late at night, exercising during the day, getting sunlight during the day, turning electronics off, doing something like relaxing to kind of soothe our body, doing breathing exercises at night, a lot of things like that that are very helpful for sleep, and prioritizing and taking care of sleep. Diet, talk about the whole episode on that. Um, like I said, there's more and more research coming out about how much of our mood and behavior is dependent on our gut biome. Um, so our diet influences our mental health a lot. I'm reading a book right now, or listening to an audiobook about all the different ways, different disorders that can be influenced by our diet and micronutrients and how they interact with each other. But I mean the very very basic, and again it depends a lot on the individual. But what has the most research is the Mediterranean diet on protecting against depression. And again, different people need different um, well, they don't. I mean, people. Yeah, depending on the medical conditions, there's different diet recommendations that work for different people. But for the most part, I think you can apply basic ones to most people, and that's fresh fruit and vegetables, fish in like moderate, small amounts of meat, um, minimal red meat, whole grains over bleached grains, like white bread, minimal sugar, olive oil, or oils that have like some omega 3s in them, nuts, butts, nuts, seeds. So nutrition is obviously its own field, and there's a lot of debate, right? A lot of debate going on. Um, that's what I've seen. That's generally the most effective for depression is following a diet that roughly outlines that. Small amounts of meat doesn't check on Uruguay. What do you mean? Americans eat so much meat. Um, Are you saying they're more plant-based? Because there is, again, there is some debate over how much animal protein is appropriate. Um, and then, I mean, the whole foods plant-based diet is also really big. But I can speak to like that. This has been research for depression. You have so much meat there that you sell for a lot of countries. Interesting. Yeah, we produce and throw out so much meat in the U.S. Oh yeah, so diet affects so many. I mean, it affects your mood, it affects your energy, it affects your concentration, it affects your libido. It affects how it affects so much. I think that it's just important to start thinking about how your diet is influencing your mood and your mental health. It's kind of a good starting off point. Hydration also, stay hydrated. I mean, there's different markers, but I've heard like somewhere around like 3 liters is a good starting point, depending on how much you exercise. And I know men need or women need a little bit more than men. Um, and just, I mean, the difference for me from just drinking enough water is insane. Um, I have like I'm foggy, I have a headache, I'm tired when I don't stay hydrated. I mean, being dehydrated makes it difficult to concentrate. You tend to get more anxious. It can, in some way, mimic some symptoms of anxiety and depression if you're dehydrated. Right. Sunlight in nature, vitamin D, right? It's vitamin D. Something that's used for depression and seasonal affective disorder is either sunlight or vitamin D or getting like a sun lamp and just having more light exposure. That's always good to have. I, some people say at least 15 minutes a day. There's some research that being out in nature, people exercise more effectively. People are more creative, even when they have like plants in their rooms. Um, Getting out in nature, there's more and more research that it's good for you. And I mean, I think a lot of us intuitively know that, right? Like getting fresh air, being outside, it feels great. And some of the mechanisms for that aren't entirely understood, but we think that some of it has to do with vitamin D from the sun, getting like fresh air and having however that's affecting your respiratory system in positive ways. Some of the aesthetics, beauty of being outside is positive. So there's more research coming out on that. And yeah, I mean, nature is good for you. I think that's luckily something that humans have because being outside is great. Another thing to keep in mind is posture. So like if you're like this, right, you're kind of signaling to your body you're tired or you're defensive. Whereas if you stand up straight with your shoulders back or you present more open, it changes your body chemistry, right? It changes the way that you feel. Um, I mean, spending a lot of time lying down or sitting down or having bad posture, it's not good for your body, not good for your mind, and really like you can even feel how different it is to like just change. Like it does change your mood, so it's important to just keep that in mind. And then the last one, just breathing. So I read Breathe by James Nestor, and it really influenced a lot of the way that I think about this stuff, or I think about the breathing and how it affects your health and your mental health. Um, a lot of us don't seem to breathe properly, and it's created like a lot of say sleep apnea at night where people are snoring, having difficulty breathing, um, and I mean not breathing properly obviously affects us in a lot of different ways. The what he recommends is breathing through your nose. That seems to be healthier than breathing through your mouth. When people, one of the experiments he talked about was he had him and another gentleman. They just had them breathe through their mouth for I forget how long. I think it was a week or 2 weeks, and then they switched and just had them breathe through their nose. And a bunch of different markers of health were like change, like objective measures of health changed. They felt very different, and like I've started noticing. exercising, breathing through my nose, it increased my endurance by a substantial amount. Um, I feel almost like more clear-headed and satiated. And mouth breathing seems to not be great for you. So if you can learn to breathe through your nose, that's healthier and more beneficial, especially for sleeping. And another principle he talks about is taking deeper breaths and taking more time to exhale. So, like slow breathing, I think it's 5.5 to 6 seconds inhale and then exhale. Because a lot of the times when we're anxious, right, we have shallow breath, so we're not getting enough oxygen, which is going to make it difficult to concentrate and make us more anxious, right? Because our nervous system isn't responding. So there's a lot of breathing techniques too that have been shown to be helpful with depression. I mean anxiety, um, and which in turn helps depression in some ways. Um, so yeah, deep breathing, breathing through your nose, exhaling fully, have um, influence your physical and mental health. There's a lot more stuff like Wim Hof breathing and stuff like that that I'm not going to really go into because the research on how they're beneficial for mental health isn't really there, but I do find it super interesting. I do Wim Hof method quite a bit. I find it really invigorating mixing that with cold showers, and I really want to see that in the literature more. It has been shown that doing that he can stave off E. coli, and just the anecdotal evidence is really enormous, and there's more research coming out. So I'm excited to kind of look at that more when it comes out. Yeah, diaphragmatic breathing too. Yep, very important. You learned on dance acting to keep constant light nose breathing. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I mean, I've done. I'm a registered or not anymore. I was. I mean, I'm certified to teach yoga, and I was registered for a year. But anyways, yeah, I went through a yoga training class, and we talked about different breathing techniques. And I don't know if they emphasized nasal breathing. If they did, I didn't. It didn't retain it. So I was surprised that I had never heard about the amount of research on nasal breathing. All right, that's just covering some of the major concepts in positive psychology that has been shown to contribute to an improved well-being. I appreciate everyone taking the time to support. Mind Body Connection on YouTube, and then Soso Sapien is Twitch. And have a nice one, everyone.